My sister humiliated me in public saying she's just the adopted one and forced me to pay a 2,847 Brazilian reals bill. What I did afterwards changed everything. My name is Sophia, I'm 32 years old, and for a long time I was my family's convenient shadow. If you saw us from the outside, you'd probably think we were a common middle-class family. My mother is a retired dentist, my father works in financial consulting, and my older sister, Marcella, has always been the star that shines brightest in any environment. And then there's me, the adopted one. The one who's always left out of family photos until someone says, "Oh wait, where's Sophia?" I used to laugh about it. I told myself they didn't mean any harm. But that was before that lunch. The lunch that changed everything. I should have known something was wrong when Marcella texted me out of the blue. "Family lunch on Sunday. Everyone's going. Don't make excuses, just say yes." That tone, half authoritarian, half condescending, was her trademark of reminding me that I never quite fit in. Still, I said yes. I always do. I guess a small, pathetic part of me still had hope. Hope that if I showed up enough, smiled enough, contributed enough, they'd finally start seeing me as more than just the adopted one. I didn't know that this lunch would be the night they'd cross a line so deep it would change everything forever. The restaurant Marcella chose wasn't just any place. It was one of those upscale places downtown, with minimalist decor, fine wood tables, and waiters who look at you as if mentally calculating how much you make. I arrived early, as always, because being late seemed disrespectful. The receptionist led me to a large table by the window, clearly reserved under the name Marcela Oliveira Santos. The name made me flinch a little. Same last name, completely different treatment. I sat down and waited, fiddling with the menu whose prices made my stomach tighten. I couldn't help but think, why this place? Why something so ostentatious? Then they arrived. Marcella, her husband Ricardo, my mother, my father, and my Aunt Paula with her husband. All smiles, laughter, that energy that fills a room like warm light. The kind of light that dims the moment they see me. "Look who's here," Marcella said, pulling out her chair with a rehearsed smile. "I thought you'd show up in flip-flops, Sophia. You know, this place has a dress code, right?" Everyone laughed. Even my father, who mumbled something about dress codes being just suggestions. I laughed softly too, because what else could I do? I wasn't there to start anything. I told myself to breathe, to let it pass, to survive another afternoon. The lunch started calmly. We talked about work, about the weather, about the new house Marcella and Ricardo were building. 4 bedrooms, a home office, and a complete gourmet area, Marcella said proudly, as if announcing a historic achievement for humanity. My mother practically glowed with pride. "You've always been so ambitious," she said, holding Marcella's hand. "You remind me so much of your father when he was young." Her eyes didn't even flicker in my direction when she said that. I just smiled and nodded, sipping my juice to fill the silence I wasn't supposed to break. At some point, the conversation turned to family traditions. My mother mentioned old Christmases, my father talked about his legendary barbecues, and my aunt brought up how Marcella used to help decorate the Christmas tree every year. Then she paused. "Oh, and Sophia, you didn't arrive in our family that specific Christmas, did you? Or was it later?" It was as if she couldn't remember if I was part of the memory or just visiting. I just nodded. "Yes," I said quietly. "I was there." Marcella smiled mischievously. "You mean when you broke Mom's favorite ornament?" Everyone laughed. My face burned, but I smiled anyway. It was an old joke. I was 12. It had been an accident, but for them it was the kind of story they loved to retell, the one where I was the punchline. The food arrived. Artisan pastas, expensive wines, dishes that looked more like art than meals. The waiters served the drinks, and for a brief moment, the atmosphere seemed calm. Then Marcella raised her glass. "A toast," she said, standing up. Everyone raised their glasses with that familiar eager look, ready to celebrate, to be seen. "To family," Marcella said, pausing dramatically. "To the people who've always been here for me, those who share my blood." She laughed and looked directly at me. "Except Sophia, of course. She's just the adopted one." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel in their minds. It was light-hearted. That's how they'd justify it later. But in that moment, it cut through me like a blade. Even the waiter froze. My mother covered her mouth, laughing awkwardly. "Marcella," she said, trying to sound disapproving but failing. That wasn't nice. But she was smiling. They all were. I felt the air leave my lungs. I wanted to shrink, disappear into the table. But I didn't disappear. I just sat there, staring at my sister. The same sister who once told me I was lucky to have been chosen by their family. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red, but I wasn't crying. Not exactly. I think it was just shock. The realization that no matter how many years had passed, I was still a stranger to them. A convenient charity case they could joke about. I thought about leaving right then. Just walking out. But something inside me stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the silent, simmering anger that had been building for years. I decided to go back and endure it. If they wanted me there, they'd have to see me. Not as a ghost, but as someone who was tired of being the family's silent spectator. When I returned, the bill had arrived. The waiter stood by the table, holding the black leather folder. "Will this be together or separate?" he asked politely. Marcella smiled and gestured toward me. "She's paying," she said, raising her glass again. "Right, Sophia? Good job now. Plenty of money to treat your real family." My mother laughed as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, how sweet," she said. "She can afford it." For a second, I thought I'd heard wrong. My brain couldn't process what was happening. The waiter handed me the bill, and I looked at the total. 2,847 Brazilian reals. My hands went cold. My first instinct was to protest, to say I hadn't agreed to this, that I hadn't even ordered half the wine they drank. But then I saw Marcella's smile. That smug, knowing smile that said she'd already won. That if I said no, they'd turn it into another joke about how cheap or ungrateful I was. Same script, different afternoon. But this time I didn't smile. Didn't laugh. I looked at the bill, then at my sister, then at the waiter. And slid the bill back to him. "Try my sister's card," I said calmly. She made the reservation in her name. The color drained from Marcella's face. "Sophia," she said slowly, her tone suddenly sharp. "This isn't funny." The waiter looked uncertain, glancing between us. "Ma'am," he said to Marcella, "the reservation was in your name, correct?" Marcella hesitated, then nodded. The room went quiet. Even my mother's smile faltered. "It was just a joke," Marcella said quickly. "We were kidding around." The waiter looked confused, unsure whether to back down or press the issue. Before anyone could say another word, the restaurant manager, a tall man in a black suit, appeared from across the dining room, clearly sensing the tension. "Is there a problem here?" he asked in a measured tone. And that's when the table finally went silent. All eyes were on me. My heart was pounding, but I remained calm. Marcella looked at me, panic flashing in her eyes for the first time. My mother whispered something inaudible. The manager crossed his arms. And I realized, this was the first time in my life I wasn't the only one shrinking. This was the moment everything started to unravel. The manager's voice was calm, but had that undertone of authority that instantly changes the air in a room. He stood there, hands crossed, looking from me to Marcella to the waiter, like a referee about to make a call. "Is there a problem with the bill?" he asked, his tone professional but with a slight edge of impatience. The restaurant had gotten quieter. You could feel eyes from nearby tables turning in our direction, catching pieces of the tension like static in the air. Marcella's confident smile wavered. "No problem," she said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "Just a misunderstanding." She laughed awkwardly, looking at me as if I'd play along and laugh too. But I didn't. I just sat there, calm, steady, almost too quiet. My heart was hammering in my chest. But on the outside, I looked like someone who had finally stopped being afraid of the noise. The manager raised an eyebrow. "A misunderstanding?" "Yes," my mother interjected, her voice light, too cheerful. "My girls like to tease each other." "Right, dears." She gave a forced laugh, her eyes darting between us as if telepathically ordering me to let it go. "Family humor, you know how it is." The waiter looked uncomfortable. He still held the bill in his hand, clearly embarrassed. "Ma'am," he said to Marcella, "since the reservation is in your name, charges are typically placed on the card of the reservation holder, unless otherwise specified." Marcella's jaw tightened. "Fine," she muttered, pulling out her wallet with exaggerated irritation. She swiped the card, signed the receipt with a sharp pen stroke, and then tossed it back to the waiter as if it burned. "There," she said, glaring at me. "Happy?" The manager gave a polite nod, mumbled something about, "enjoy the rest of your day," and walked away. But the silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the faint clatter of dishes from another table, laughter from somewhere across the dining room. But at our table, there was only tension. Thick, suffocating tension. Marcella leaned forward, her voice low. "What was that, Sophia? You trying to embarrass me in public?" I met her eyes. I wasn't the one who made a joke about being adopted in front of strangers. My mother sighed heavily. "Oh, for God's sake, it was just a joke," she said. "You're so sensitive sometimes, Sophia. Honestly, you need to learn to take a little teasing." "A little teasing?" I repeated quietly. You all laughed. My father finally spoke, his voice in that deep, no-nonsense tone he used when he wanted to end a discussion. "Enough. It was inappropriate." "Yes, but dragging this out just makes things worse. Let's not make a scene." Marcella smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, Sophia. Don't make a scene." Something inside me twisted. For years, I'd swallowed that same tone. The condescending, calm one. The unspoken, "be grateful we invited you." I'd accepted it because it was easier than fighting back. But this time, I didn't let it pass. I just nodded slowly, grabbed my coat, and said, "You're right. No scenes." I stood up, left 50 reais on the table for the tip, and walked out. Outside, the air was warm and humid. My breath came in short bursts as I stood there for a moment, trying to process everything. The restaurant lights reflected on the wet asphalt from the last rain, and for the first time in a long while, I felt disconnected. As if I'd stepped out of a role I'd been playing for years. My phone buzzed before I even reached my car. It was my mother. I looked at the screen for a second before answering. "Sophia, what was that?" she said, her tone now sharp, the fake warmth gone. What?" I asked. "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Marcella was just trying to include you, and you made a scene. You humiliated your sister in front of everyone." I let out a bitter laugh. "She humiliated me, Mom. In front of the entire restaurant. But, of course, let's protect Marcella's feelings." She paused. I could hear her sigh, that kind she used when she was tired of me not falling in line. "You always take things too seriously. You should have let it go. Marcella didn't mean anything by it. She was just joking when she said those things." I didn't respond. Because what was there to say? I'd been hearing the same thing my entire life. Marcella didn't mean anything. Marcella was just joking. Marcella was under pressure. And I was always the one who was supposed to understand. That night, I sat in my car for almost half an hour before starting it. I watched families passing by, laughing, talking, taking photos together. It struck me how strange that seemed. Being part of something genuine. Something where everyone was seen. In my family, love was a performance. And I was the understudy. In the following days, the family WhatsApp group exploded. Marcella sent a message first. "Hope everyone enjoyed lunch." Except Sophia, apparently. She added a laughing emoji. My aunt responded with "girls will be girls." And my mother chimed in with "let's move on, please." Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody mentioned the toast. A week later, my mother called me again. "We're having a barbecue next weekend," she said, "at Marcella's house. You're coming, right?" I hesitated. "I don't know, Mom." Her tone softened immediately, as if she were switching masks. "Sophia, please don't make this into something bigger than it is. You know how much it means to your father to have everyone together." I almost said no. But then I thought about the way Marcella looked when the manager approached, how her confidence cracked for just a second. There was something satisfying about that. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to see how far they'd go if I kept showing up. So I said, "Sure, I'll go." When I showed up at the barbecue, the tension was immediate. Marcella was at the grill, flipping meat with the swagger of a cooking show host. Ricardo hovered nearby, passing out drinks like he was co-hosting a talk show. My mother and father were arranging beach chairs, and the rest of the relatives were scattered around the backyard. The moment Marcella saw me, she raised her beer can in a mocking toast. "Look who decided to show up," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry, folks, Sophia's not paying for this one." The laughter that followed wasn't as loud as before. Some people exchanged awkward glances. Maybe word of the restaurant scene had spread. But my mother still laughed. Of course she did. "Stop it," she said, lightly tapping Marcella's arm. "You too, and you're teasing." I smiled tightly. "Yeah, teasing." Marcella grinned. "Come on, relax. You've been sour-faced since lunch. Can't you take a joke, little sis?" Little sis. I hated when she called me that. Not because of the little, I was actually taller than her, but because of how she said it. Like she was reminding everyone I was the lesser one. Throughout the afternoon, she kept finding new ways to poke at me. "Sophia, get me a beer." "Sophia, you're sitting in Dad's chair." "Sophia, better stick to soda." Don't want to rack up another big bill, right? Every time, I smiled and complied. Outwardly calm. Internally, I was cataloging every comment, every sideways smile. Ricardo wasn't much better. He leaned in at one point while we were getting food and said in that fake sweet tone he used when gossiping, "Marcella told me you've always been kind of sensitive about this adoption thing. But you shouldn't be, you know? It's kind of special, don't you think? Like, you were chosen." "Yeah," I said, staring at him. "Chosen by whom, exactly?" He blinked, disconcerted. "By your parents, of course." I smiled slightly. "Right. They remind me of that every time Marcella screws up." His face went blank for a moment. Then he laughed awkwardly and walked away. The rest of the afternoon dragged on, a series of small humiliations wrapped in polite laughter. Every conversation was a reminder that I was the outsider. When it came time for the family photo, I stood to the side, waiting. They lined up, smiling, arms around each other. "Come on, Sophia," my mother called. "You can stand at the end. At the end. Always at the end." I stepped into the frame, forcing a smile, and the camera clicked. But when I saw the photo later on my mother's Facebook, I noticed she'd cropped me out. The caption read, "My beautiful family." That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through old photos, messages, memories, trying to figure out when exactly I'd stopped being part of the family and started being a placeholder. Maybe it had never been real from the start. Maybe I was just convenient. Until I wasn't anymore. In the following days, things got worse. Marcella started telling relatives that I'd gotten weird, that I was holding a grudge over nothing. My mother backed her up, saying I'd been distant lately. They painted me as ungrateful, bitter, the black sheep of the family. The more I stayed silent, the easier it was for them to rewrite the story. But silence had its uses. It made people comfortable, made them underestimate you. A few nights later, I got a call from my father. His tone was blunt, pragmatic. "Your sister is planning a big anniversary dinner next month. She wants to invite you. You're going." "She wants to invite me?" I asked. "Or did you force her to?" My father sighed. "Don't start. This family has been through enough tension. You'll go, you'll be polite, and you'll keep the peace." "Sure," I said. "I'll keep the peace." But what I didn't tell him was that something inside me had shifted. For years, I'd played the role of the quiet, understanding daughter. The one who forgave. The one who laughed at jokes that cut and took the blame. But now, something colder had taken root. When I hung up, I opened my laptop and started taking notes. Because if my sister wanted to play games in public, I was finally ready to play too. And this time, I wouldn't be the punchline. The anniversary dinner was scheduled for a Friday night at an exclusive country club. One of those old money establishments where the waiters wear white gloves and the carpet looks like it hasn't been changed since the 1980s. The kind of place where Marcella loved to show off. It was to celebrate 5 years of marriage between her and Ricardo, and according to my mother, everyone was invited. By everyone, she meant the entire extended family. Cousins, uncles, aunts. Even some of Marcella's tennis club friends who always looked at me like I'd wandered into the wrong movie. For 2 weeks before the event, I told myself I wouldn't go. Told myself I was done letting them pull me back into their orbit. But there was this feeling gnawing at my chest. Like leaving would give them exactly what they wanted. They thrived on the idea that I was the bitter outsider. If I didn't show up, I'd be feeding the narrative they'd built around me. So, against my better judgment, I ironed my blouse, put on my best dress, and decided to face the music. When I arrived, the parking lot was already full of expensive cars. Marcella's new SUV parked right at the entrance, of course. The woman loved being the center of attention. Inside, the club was softly lit, golden chandeliers reflecting in crystal glasses. I could hear the faint murmur of laughter and clinking glasses even before I turned the corner to the main hall. "Sophia," my mother exclaimed, rising from her seat as if she hadn't spent the last few months making excuses for Marcella's behavior. "You made it." She hugged me briefly, the kind of hug that felt more for show than affection. "You look lovely, dear. Sit, sit." Marcella was at the head of the long table, wearing a navy blazer and her usual smile, the kind that looked rehearsed. "Well, look who decided to join the living," she said. "I was starting to think you'd cut us off completely." "Wouldn't want to miss the show," I said, smiling. Ricardo grinned broadly, clearly oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. "We're so glad you're here," he said sweetly, though his eyes flickered to Marcella as if seeking approval even for that phrase. I sat across from my mother and father. The table was set with place cards, candles, and menus printed on cream paper. Everyone looked photo-ready. It felt surreal, like a staged gathering for a reality show that had been canceled years ago. As the evening progressed, I did my best to blend in, smiled when people spoke, nodded when they told stories, and even laughed when my uncle made one of his typical dad jokes. I kept my guard up but remained calm. It was easier than I thought, until Marcella stood up with a glass in her hand. She lightly tapped her fork against the glass. "Everyone," she said, "I just want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate 5 incredible years with my wonderful husband." She wrapped her arm around Ricardo's waist, pulling him close. "He's my rock, my partner, my better half. I wouldn't be the woman I am today without him." Everyone applauded. I clapped too, without much enthusiasm. And Marcella continued, "I also want to thank my parents for everything they've done for us over the years. You've always been there, helping us with the house, with bills, with, well, everything." My mother smiled, tears in her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart." "Yeah," Marcella said with a wink. "Even helping us financially when things got tough last year. I don't know what I'd do without you." I froze. My mother and father exchanged a quick glance, that kind of silent communication that meant there was truth in what she said, but something about it didn't add up. Marcella wasn't the type to admit needing help. She'd rather drown than ask for a life vest. I leaned slightly forward. "What kind of help?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Marcella smirked. "Oh, just some support for a new investment I made. You know how it is. Big dreams require big risks." My father cleared his throat. "It's not something we need to discuss tonight," he said, his voice firm. Marcella raised an eyebrow. "Why not? Everyone should know how much you've done for me." Mom and Dad were generous enough to give me part of their savings so I could make a down payment on a new property. "Pretty amazing, right?" The table murmured in approval. My mother smiled tightly, her hand trembling near her wine glass. "It was a family decision," she said softly. "Wait," I said. "A family decision?" Marcella looked at me amused. "Yeah, Mom and Dad said it was the right thing to do. I mean, it's not like anyone else in the family needed it." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my stomach drop. My mother sighed. "Sophia," she said quietly, "we didn't think you'd mind. Marcella has been working so hard to support her family and—" I cut her off. "You gave her money from your savings? How much?" My father's jaw tightened. "Sophia, not the time." "No," I said, my voice steady. "If we're making toasts about this, I think it's exactly the time." Marcella laughed, throwing up her hands in mock surrender. "Relax, sis. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal," I repeated. "You took money from our parents' retirement fund?" My mother flinched. "It wasn't that much." "How much, Mom?" She hesitated. "Just 85,000 Brazilian reals." The silence in the room was absolute. Someone coughed. Ricardo shifted uncomfortably, his smile fading. I stared at her, then at Marcella. "You took 85,000 Brazilian reals and thought you didn't need to tell me?" My father frowned. "Sophia, you're not in a position to question what we do with our money. You've always been independent. You made your own way." Marcella needed help, and we were able to give it. I felt something inside me snap. "You're right," I said quietly. "I was independent because I had to be. Because nobody ever offered me help." My mother's voice trembled. "Don't make this into a competition, please. You always had everything you needed." "Everything I needed?" I repeated, trying not to laugh. "You mean the broken-down car I had to fix myself because you said you couldn't justify buying me one? Or how about that time I got into college, and you told me you'd already spent too much on Marcella's tuition?" "Yeah, I remember all the generosity." Marcella rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on. Are you really bringing that up now? You've always had this complex, sis. It's not my fault you can't let the past go." I looked at her, my pulse racing. "You're right. It's not your fault. It's mine for thinking I was part of this family." The words hit the table like a hammer. Nobody spoke. For a long moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of conversations from other tables and the sound of my own breathing. Marcella shrugged. "You're overreacting," she said finally. "Mom and Dad helped me because they trust me. You just waste the money." "Waste?" I said slowly. "You mean like you wasted the money they gave you for that venture in 2019? Or that time you crashed Dad's car and blamed me?" My mother gasped softly. "Sophia, don't bring that up." "Why not?" I asked. "It's part of the same story, isn't it? Marcella screws up, and everyone runs to protect her. I make one complaint, and I'm ungrateful." Marcella stood up, her expression hardening. "You're making a fool of yourself." "No," I said, standing up too. "You did that for me years ago." She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the club manager appeared, different from the restaurant manager weeks ago, but with the same look of polite alarm on his face. "Is everything all right here?" "Everything's great," Marcella said quickly, forcing a smile. Just a family discussion. I looked around the table. Nobody would meet my eyes. My mother was staring at her plate. My father was rubbing his temples. Ricardo was biting his lip, clearly wishing he could disappear. I took a step back. You know what? I said. Enjoy your dinner. I turned and walked out before anyone could stop me. As soon as I reached the parking lot, I finally let the emotion hit me. Anger. Disbelief. Hurt. It all rolled through me like a wave. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the realization that I was never considered equal. Not even close. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. I thought about all the times I'd tried to earn their respect, their approval. All the years I'd laughed at jokes that cut me, smiled through birthdays that felt empty, attended dinners where I was the invisible guest. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcella. You really embarrassed yourself tonight. Mom's crying. Dad's furious. You should apologize. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Then slowly I smiled. Not the bitter kind. The quiet, dangerous kind. The kind that comes when something finally breaks free inside you. Because in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close. The days following that dinner felt like living inside a fog. Everything seemed normal on the outside. Work. Breakfast. The same quiet apartment. But inside, I felt eviscerated. I didn't realize how much hope I'd been holding on to until it was gone. That small, pathetic belief that maybe one day, I'd finally be treated like family. But after that night, something inside me just shut off. My mother called the next morning. Her tone was clipped, rehearsed. Sophia, she said, we need to talk about your behavior last night. My behavior? I asked, staring at the blank wall. Yes, she said sharply. You humiliated your sister in front of everyone. Do you know how many people were there? Claire's parents, for God's sake. That was supposed to be a celebration. I let out a low laugh. You mean the part where I found out you gave her 85,000 Brazilian reals behind my back? She was silent for a moment. We didn't give it to her. It's a loan. Right, I said. And when exactly is she paying it back? Sophia, please don't be petty, she said, her voice tightening. Marcella has a family to take care of. You don't. And there it was. The dagger, wrapped perfectly in maternal tone. Right, I said. I forgot. My value is directly proportional to how many dependents I have. She sighed. You're twisting everything. You always do this. You make yourself the victim when nobody's trying to hurt you. I'm not the victim, I said quietly. I'm just tired of pretending you're not playing favorites. Watch your tone, she snapped. We've always treated you the same. That phrase, treated you the same, hit me harder than anything else. Because it was such an obvious lie, it almost sounded cruel. My throat tightened. You don't even believe that, I said. Not for a second. Goodbye, Sophia, she said. Call me when you've calmed down. And just like that, she hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, waiting for it to ring again. It didn't. That was the day I realized something had permanently shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in that explosive, fiery way. I was just empty. I stopped making contact. Stopped responding to the family group. Stopped trying. But here's the thing about silence. It makes people uncomfortable. Within a week, Marcella texted me. Do you really think you're proving something by ignoring everyone? I ignored it. A few hours later, another message. Mom's upset. She says you're acting immature. Still ignored. Then a third. Fine, be a baby. You always were anyway. I blocked her number after that. For the first time in my life, I went completely no contact with my family. No calls. No visits. No birthday messages. Nothing. The first few days felt strange, like detoxing. But by the second week, I started feeling lighter. I could breathe again without waiting for the next guilt trip. I threw myself into work, stayed late at the office, went for long runs at night just to keep my mind busy. But the quiet hours, those were the hardest. That's when the memories came crawling back. I remembered being 14 and overhearing Marcella tell one of her friends, yeah, my parents adopted her when they couldn't have more kids. She's basically charity. I remembered my mother saying, you have to understand, dear, Marcella is under a lot of pressure. Every time she said something cruel. I remembered birthdays where my cake was store-bought and hers was custom. Or the Christmas when they gave me a clearance sweater and her a gold watch. I'd let all of it slide at the time, convincing myself it didn't matter. But sitting alone in my apartment, I realized it did matter. Every moment of it had been building to this. This quiet, painful clarity. 2 months passed before I heard from them again. I was at work, typing an email when my phone buzzed. It was my father. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hi," I said flatly. "Sophia," he said, his voice rigid. "You've ignored your mother for weeks. What's going on?" "What's going on," I repeated slowly, "is that I'm tired." "Tired of what?" he demanded. "Tired of pretending everything's okay," I said. "Tired of acting like I haven't noticed the way you all treat me." He let out a frustrated sigh. "You're being dramatic. Families fight. It's normal." "Normal," I said, my voice tightening. "Dad, you gave 85,000 Brazilian reals to my sister and told me I should be happy for her. That's not normal." "I didn't tell you to be happy," he said defensively. "I told you to be understanding. You're single, you don't have dependents, and you have a stable job. Marcella is carrying more responsibility than you. You could have been more supportive." There it was again, the logic that always seemed to justify his choices. "Supportive," I said, almost laughing. "You want me to support the person who humiliated me in public twice in 1 month?" He didn't respond for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had softened. "You've always been sensitive, Sophia. I'm sorry you feel overlooked, but that's how families work. You can't keep score." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't capable of seeing it. None of them were. Didn't think they were wrong. They genuinely believed I was the problem. That realization hit harder than anything else. Because how do you fight something that deep? After that call, I stopped answering completely. Weeks passed. Then months. The holidays came and went. I spent Christmas alone for the first time, eating takeout while it snowed outside my apartment. It should have felt depressing, but it didn't. It felt peaceful. Quiet. Honest. Still, there was this ache I couldn't shake. That small, stubborn part of me that wanted closure. That wanted them to call and say, "We were wrong." But they never called. In early spring, I ran into one of my cousins, Bianca, at a coffee shop downtown. She froze when she saw me. "Sophia, oh my God, it's been so long since I've seen you." I smiled slightly. "Hi Bianca, how have you been?" She hesitated before saying, "Your family has been talking about you." I raised an eyebrow. "I can imagine." She bit her lip. "They said you cut them off for no reason. That you're being difficult." "Of course they did." "I don't believe that," she said quickly. "I was at that dinner, Sophia. I saw how uncomfortable you looked. It wasn't right." For the first time in months, I felt seen. "Thank you," I said quietly. She hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Can I tell you something weird?" "Sure." "Marcella has been bragging," she said. "She said she's opening a new business, something with real estate. She even said she used family funds to start it." "Family funds?" I repeated. "Yeah, that's what she called it. She said Mom and Dad were backing her. But she said it like she didn't have to pay it back. Like it was hers by default." I felt my jaw tighten. "Interesting." Bianca frowned. "She's also been saying you're jealous. That you've always been resentful because you were adopted." There it was again. The old narrative. The same tired story she'd been telling since we were kids. I forced a small smile. "Thanks for telling me, Bianca." She looked worried. "What are you going to do?" I finished my coffee before responding. "Honestly? Nothing." And I meant it. At least in that moment. I was tired of fighting a battle that was always rigged. Tired of trying to prove I wasn't the villain in someone else's story. So I went home, turned off my phone, and sat in silence for a long time. But silence has a strange way of breeding ideas. In the quiet, I started thinking. Not about revenge exactly, but about patterns. About how Marcella used people, manipulated situations, always landed on her feet because everyone picked up the pieces. And I realized that people like that only get away with it because nobody ever holds them accountable. What if I thought someone finally did? That night, I opened my laptop. Not to write an angry email or post on social media. Just to research. Small things at first. Property records. Business registrations. Ownership transfers. The kind of information that's publicly available if you know where to look. And there it was. Marcella's name. Linked to a company she'd registered 3 months ago. The same timeline as the family loan. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell me something. She wasn't struggling. She was expanding. Using my parents' money to build something in her name alone. I stared at the screen for a long time. A quiet, almost eerie calm settling over me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. But I knew one thing for certain. If Marcella thought I was going to disappear quietly this time, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The strange thing about hitting rock bottom is that it stops feeling like a place and starts feeling like freedom. There's a kind of peace in realizing you have nothing left to lose. No more approval to chase. No more fake smiles to maintain. No more calls you're obligated to return. After years of trying to belong to people who only saw me as a convenient afterthought, I finally felt weightless. The weeks that followed were quiet but productive. I threw myself into work. Really threw myself into it this time. I'd been working as a systems analyst for a fintech company, and I'd always been the one who did everything right but was never noticed. The reliable one who covered shifts, never complained, and never asked for more. But something had changed in me. I stopped playing small. I started taking initiative on projects, proposing new optimization systems, presenting in meetings instead of disappearing to the back of the room. And for the first time, people noticed. By summer, I'd been promoted twice. Suddenly, I wasn't just the quiet girl in the corner anymore. I was leading a small team. My salary jumped, and with it came something new. Confidence. Not the loud, arrogant kind that Marcella always wore like perfume, but the quiet kind that came from knowing you'd built something yourself, brick by brick, without anyone's handouts. Outside of work, I started rebuilding myself too. I joined a gym, more out of restlessness than vanity, and found myself enjoying the routine, the rhythm of workouts, the focus it demanded. It became therapy. I started sleeping better, eating better, even picked up photography again, something I'd abandoned years ago when life felt too heavy for hobbies. Occasionally, I'd catch myself thinking about them. My family. If they thought about me. If they'd ever realized how deeply they'd fractured things. But every time that thought surfaced, I'd remind myself. They had their version of the story, and I had mine. And mine didn't include being their scapegoat ever again. Still, the universe has a twisted sense of humor. One morning in late July, as I was finishing up a quarterly report at work, an email pinged into my inbox. Subject: Business Inquiry, Carter Investments. I froze. Carter Investments. Marcella's new company. The message was from an unfamiliar email, but the name attached to the signature made my stomach tighten. Ricardo Carter. Hi, Sophia. Hope you're well. Marcella mentioned that your company works with financial and logistics systems, and we're exploring new vendors for our real estate expansion. I know things have been kind of tense, but I told her we should reach out to you professionally. If you're open to it, we'd love to schedule a consultation to discuss a possible partnership. Ricardo. I stared at the email for a long time, torn between disbelief and something darker. Amusement. After all the humiliation. After the jokes. After the money they'd drained from our parents. He was now indirectly asking me for help. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and laughed softly to myself. The irony was delicious. I didn't respond immediately. I waited a few days, long enough to let the anticipation simmer on their end. When I finally responded, my tone was perfectly professional. Hi, Ricardo. Thanks for reaching out. Happy to discuss possibilities. I'm currently managing multiple accounts, but I can fit in a consultation next week. Please have Marcella send over your business documentation and current logistics structure in advance, so I can review. Best, Sophia. No emotion. No personal touch. Just business. The next day, a thick folder arrived in my inbox. Financial reports. Vendor lists. Everything. I opened it out of curiosity, expecting to skim through, but what I found made me stop cold. Buried in the spreadsheets were transactions that didn't make sense. Large, recurring withdrawals labeled as consulting fees, all directed to a private account in Marcella's name. The amounts were too consistent, too deliberate to be accidental. It looked like she was moving funds from the company to her personal account. Classic financial diversion. It didn't take long to confirm. A quick public search showed that Carter Investments had already missed several payments to contractors, and there were complaints online about delayed invoices. Marcella's company wasn't thriving. It was crumbling. Fast. And now she needed me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I had the upper hand. I didn't even need to use it. Just knowing I had it was enough to completely shift the power dynamic. I met with Ricardo and Marcella the following week at a coffee shop downtown. The moment I walked in, I could feel the tension. Marcella looked uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. Stiff posture. Fake smile. Eyes darting around the room as if afraid someone would overhear. Sophia, she said, forcing a smile. Wow, it's been a while. You look good. Thank you, I said evenly. So do you. Ricardo jumped in quickly. We're so glad you could meet. Marcella has been talking about how much your company has grown. I turned to her, smiling politely. That's nice of her. I didn't know she was following my career. Marcella cleared her throat. Well, I try to keep tabs on everyone. Of course you do. We talked business for a while. Or rather, they talked and I listened. Marcella used buzzwords she clearly didn't understand. Scalability. Operational synergy. Trying to sound like the expert in the room. But the more she talked, the clearer it became how deep she was sinking. After an hour, Ricardo leaned forward. So, what do you think? Could your company handle our logistics? I folded my hands on the table. That depends, I said, on whether your company is stable enough to handle ours. Marcella frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I slid my tablet across the table, opened to one of the documents they'd sent me. Your financials show recurring discrepancies. Money moving from business accounts to a personal one. Yours. Her face went pale. Those are just internal transfers. You wouldn't understand the structure. Try explaining it to me, I said calmly. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, defensively, you have no right to accuse me of anything. I didn't accuse you, I said. I just asked for clarification. Ricardo looked confused. Marcella, what is she talking about? She shot him a look, but he didn't back down. I leaned back, calm as ever. I'm not interested in getting involved with a company that might be under financial investigation in 6 months, I said. It's bad optics for us. I wish you all the best, though. I stood up, grabbed my things, and walked out before they could respond. As I left, I caught Marcella's reflection in the coffee shop window. Her expression twisted in panic. Her composure cracked wide open. For the first time in my life, she looked small. After that meeting, things moved quickly. Word started spreading in the business community that Carter Investments was in trouble. Contractors were pulling out, suppliers were demanding upfront payment, and some of her investors started talking about legal action. I hadn't said a word, but I didn't need to. The truth was already loud enough on its own. Meanwhile, my life was thriving. Work was booming. I hired new staff, some of them fresh out of college. I made a point to mentor them, to give them the kind of encouragement I'd always wished someone had given me. Watching them succeed became my quiet redemption. One afternoon, I received a letter. An actual handwritten letter, with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sophia, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I understand now. Everything I did, everything I said, was out of jealousy. You were always stronger than me. You didn't need approval. You didn't need anyone. That scared me. I've lost everything. But maybe that's what I needed to finally see. Take care of Mom and Dad. They don't deserve what I put them through. Marcella. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part wanted to believe. But I didn't respond. Some things are better left unsaid. A few weeks later, my mother called again. She's moving to another state, she said softly. Starting over somewhere new. Good, I said. She needs that. And that was it. That's how the Oliveira family quietly fractured and rebuilt. Not with a dramatic reunion. Not with forgiveness or hugs. But with distance, honesty, and silence. My mother and father eventually bought a small apartment near downtown. We talk sometimes now. Cautiously. Carefully. Like two people learning a language they once mangled. It's not perfect, but it's real. I visit them occasionally. Bring groceries, fix things around their apartment. I don't do it out of obligation. I do it because it feels right. Because I can finally choose what kind of person I want to be, without anyone defining it for me. And sometimes on quiet nights, I think back to that restaurant. The toast. The laughter. The humiliation. The moment my sister raised her glass and said, "To family." Except Sophia, of course. She's just the adopted one. I remember how small I felt. How powerless. And then I remember sliding that 2,847 Brazilian reals bill across the table and watching her face drain of color. The first crack in a mask that would eventually shatter completely. In a way, that moment wasn't just the beginning of my revenge. It was the beginning of my freedom. Because sometimes, you don't get justice by fighting louder. You get it by walking away and letting the truth do its work. And when the dust finally settles, you realize the sweetest revenge isn't watching them fall. It's standing tall in the silence they left behind. 6 months had passed since I last saw Marcella. 6 months of silence, of rebuilding, of finally learning to live without carrying the weight of a family that never considered me whole. I'd convinced myself I was at peace, that I'd moved on. But the truth is, some wounds don't heal completely. They just form a scab thin enough for you to pretend they're not still bleeding. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, during a meeting with my team, that my phone buzzed with a bank notification. I'd normally ignore it, but something made me look. It was an alert about a significant transfer. Not to my account. From my parents' account. My heart raced. I opened the banking app, the one my mother had added me to as an emergency contact years ago and never removed. And there it was. A transfer of 120,000 Brazilian reals from my parents' joint account to an account I recognized immediately. Carter Investments. My hands started shaking. She'd done it again. Even after everything. Even after the promise of starting over. Marcella had gone back and drained even more money from our parents. I finished the meeting on autopilot, my mind spinning. When everyone left, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. "Sophia, what a nice surprise," she said, her voice cautiously cheerful. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just saw a large transfer from your account." "What's going on?" Silence. Then a sigh. "Oh, that. I repeated. "Mom, that's 120,000 Brazilian reals. You don't even have that much left after the last time." "We had to help Sophia," she said, her voice becoming defensive. "Marcella is in a difficult situation. Her company had some problems. She needed capital to recover." I closed my eyes. The anger burned so hot I could barely breathe. "She promised she'd pay back the last loan. And she will," my mother insisted. "She said that as soon as the company stabilizes, she'll pay everything back." "Mom, her company is failing. She's diverting funds. I saw the records." "You don't know that," my mother said sharply. "You just want to see her fail because you're jealous." The word landed like a slap. Jealous. It always came back to that. "I'm not jealous," I said calmly. "I'm trying to protect you from losing everything." "We don't need your protection, Sophia. We need you to support your sister like a family should." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my office for a full hour, just staring at the wall. All the old wounds had been reopened. All the promises I'd made to myself about letting go, about moving on, evaporated. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It was about my parents, who would work until they were 80 because Marcella had stolen their retirement. It was about justice. And if nobody else was going to do something about it, I would. I started slowly, meticulously. That night, I called a friend who worked in forensic auditing. I scheduled a coffee. "I need a favor," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "I need you to look at these financial records." Unofficially. He leafed through the documents, his expression growing more serious with each page. "Where did you get this?" "Doesn't matter." "What do you see?" He whistled low. "Clear diversion. Fake invoices. Unauthorized transfers. Whoever's running this company is either desperate or criminal. Probably both. Can you document this? In a way that's admissible?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Sophia, if you're thinking about going after this person, you need to understand this could get really ugly." "It's already ugly," I said. "I'm just leveling the playing field." He nodded slowly. "Give me a week." While I waited, I started doing my own digging. I called some of the contractors who'd worked with Carter Investments. I pretended to be considering a partnership, asking casual questions about their experiences. The stories I heard were consistent. Late payments. Broken promises. One contractor told me Marcella convinced him to start a job with only 30% upfront, promising the rest upon completion. When he finished, she said the money was tied up and made him wait 6 months. He never received the full amount. "She's a con artist," he said bitterly. "Avoid that woman like the plague." Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle. And each piece confirmed what I already knew. Marcella wasn't just mismanaging a business. She was knowingly defrauding people. A week later, my friend called me. "I have what you need." "And Sophia? This is worse than I thought. She's not just diverting. She's committing wire fraud. If this goes to the right authorities, she's looking at criminal charges." "Send me everything," I said. That night, I sat with 3 thick folders of evidence spread across my dining table. Bank statements. Witness declarations. Public records showing how Marcella had registered multiple shell LLCs to move money around. She'd built a maze so complex she probably thought she'd never get caught. But mazes have patterns. And I'd always been good at finding patterns. The question was, what would I do with this? I could go straight to the police, hand everything over and let justice run its course. But part of me knew that would destroy my parents. They'd already lost so much. Watching their daughter go to prison might break them completely. Or I could use this as leverage. Force her to return every penny, to step away from our parents forever, to finally face consequences without destroying the entire family in the process. I decided to try the second way first. I sent Marcella a message. Just 3 words: "We need to talk." She responded immediately. About what? In person. Tomorrow. The cafe near your old house. Noon. There was a long pause. Then, okay. When I arrived at the cafe the next morning, Marcella was already there. She looked different. Thinner. Dark circles under her eyes. The designer clothes had been replaced with plain jeans and a basic blouse. The veneer had cracked. "Sophia," she said cautiously as I sat down. "What's this about?" I placed a folder on the table between us. "It's about you stopping stealing from our parents." Her face went white. "I don't know what you're—" "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't do that. Don't insult me by pretending. I have everything, Marcella. Every transfer. Every fake invoice. Every shell company you created to launder money. I have statements from contractors you scammed. I have forensic analysis showing exactly how you diverted funds." Her hands started trembling. "You can't prove anything." I opened the folder and started laying documents on the table, one by one. Transfer of 85,000 Brazilian reals in January. Labeled as investment loan. Never returned. Transfer of 120,000 Brazilian reals 3 weeks ago. Same thing. Here are the records of your LLC Horizon Properties, which exists only on paper. And here, I placed down the last page. Is the forensic analysis linking all of this back to you? Marcella stared at the papers like they were snakes. "What do you want?" "I want you to return every penny you took from them. Every single penny." She let out a humorless laugh. "I don't have that money, Sophia. It's all invested." "It's all lost, you mean?" "Because you're a terrible businesswoman who thought she could fake it till she made it. But I don't care where you get the money. Sell your cars. Sell your house. Sell the jewelry you bought with their money. But you're going to pay it back. And if I don't?" I leaned forward. "Then I take this to the federal police. Wire fraud, Marcella. You know what the penalty for that is? Up to 20 years in federal prison. And unlike mom and dad, the feds won't care that you were the favorite daughter." Tears started rolling down her face. Not tears of remorse. Tears of panic. "You're blackmailing me." "No," I said calmly. "I'm giving you a choice. Option 1, you sell what you need to sell, take out loans, do whatever you have to do, and return 205,000 Brazilian reals to our parents within the next 6 weeks. You sign a legally binding document saying you'll never borrow money from them again. And you step away. No more family lunches. No more favors. You go back to whatever state you were running away to and leave them alone. And option 2? Option 2. I go to the authorities this afternoon with all of this. You go to prison. Mom and dad lose everything anyway, but at least everyone will know the truth about who you really are." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something. Not pity exactly. More like sadness for what could have been if she'd been a different person. "You always hated me," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "I loved you. That's why it hurt so much." She wiped her eyes, her hands still shaking. "How do I know you won't go to the police anyway?" "You don't. You'll have to trust me." "Which is more than you ever deserved." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then, she nodded. 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I confirmed. "And Marcella? If you tell our parents about this conversation, if you try to make me the villain again, the deal's off." "Understood." She nodded again, miserable. I stood up, grabbed my folder, and paused. "One more thing. That letter you sent me. About understanding and jealousy and all that? I wanted to believe it. But words are cheap. If you've really changed, prove it with actions." I walked out without looking back. The following 6 weeks were agony. Every day I checked my parents' account, waiting to see if Marcella would follow through. In the 3rd week, a transfer of 50,000 Brazilian reals appeared. Then another for 30,000 Brazilian reals. Small amounts trickling in from different sources. She was selling things. Liquidating assets. Following through. On the morning of the last day of the 6th week, the final transfer came through. 125,000 Brazilian reals. The full amount returned. I sat in my apartment, staring at the bank notification, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not from sadness. Not exactly from relief either. But from something close to closure. I called my mother that afternoon. "Mom, have you checked your bank account recently?" "No, why?" "Just check it." I heard her fumbling with her phone, then a gasp. "Sophia, this money. Where did it come from? Marcella paid it back, I said simply. All of it. But how? She said she was broke. She sold what she needed to sell. Mom, I need you to promise me something. Don't lend her money anymore. Ever. No matter what she says. No matter how desperate she seems. You got your retirement back. Protect it. There was a long pause. Then in a small voice, how did you know? How did you make this happen? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you're safe now. My mother started crying. Sophia, we owe you an apology. A real apology. 4 years of favoritism. For making you feel less than. For choosing her over you repeatedly. You were right about everything. I didn't know what to say. It was the apology I'd waited my entire life for. But now that it had come, it felt strange. Like putting a band-aid on an old scar. Thank you, I said finally. That means a lot. Can you forgive us? I thought about it. Forgiveness. That's what everyone expected. The clean, tidy closure. But life doesn't work that way. I'm working on it, I said honestly. It's going to take time. But I'm willing to try. It was all I could offer. And it was enough. That night, I received one last message from Marcella. The money was transferred. I'm moving to Curitiba next week. Starting over. For real this time. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope you know. You're stronger than I'll ever be. You always were. I didn't respond. But I didn't block the number either. Just left the message there, unread but not deleted. A silent acknowledgement that some relationships can't be fixed, but can be honestly ended. 3 months later, my parents invited me to dinner. Just the three of us. No extended family. No agenda. Just home-cooked food in their small apartment. It was strange at first. Careful conversations about work, about the weather, about neighbors. But slowly, it started feeling less like walking on eggshells and more like genuine connection. My father told me about a trip he and my mother were planning. With the money back, we can actually retire properly now, he said. We were thinking about renting an RV and seeing the country. That sounds amazing, I said, and I meant it. My mother took my hand across the table. We want you to know, Sophia. We're including you in the will properly now. 50-50. Like it always should have been. I squeezed her hand. Thank you. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, unresolved memories hovering at the edges of our conversations. But it was real. And real was better than pretending. As for me, I bought that commercial lot that had been Carter Investments. Turned it into a co-working space for startups, specifically for female entrepreneurs. Women who were building something from nothing, who needed a boost, mentorship, the kind of support I never received. I called it the Roots Foundation. Because sometimes when your roots are cut, you have to plant new ones. One Saturday afternoon, I was showing the space to a group of potential tenants when a young woman approached timidly. Excuse me, she said, but are you Sophia Oliveira? I read about you online. About how you built your company from scratch. I smiled. That's me. You're like my inspiration. I was adopted too, and my family. She paused, her eyes becoming glassy. They don't really understand me. But seeing what you've done, it gives me hope. My heart squeezed. What's your name? Melissa. Well, Melissa, let me tell you something it took me a long time to learn. Your family doesn't define your worth. You do. And sometimes, the strongest family you'll have is the one you choose, not the one you were born into. She smiled, wiping her eyes. Thank you. I needed to hear that. After everyone left, I stood alone in the empty space, sunlight streaming through the large windows. I thought about everything that had happened. The restaurant. The humiliation. The slow building of evidence. The confrontation. The payback. I thought about Marcella somewhere in Curitiba, hopefully truly building a new life. I thought about my parents,